let's create a new program and take a look at the creation of classes and objects. The first thing to know is that we don't want to create our class inside of the class program. So we're going to create it outside, and we do that with the keyword class, and then we give the class a name. Let's create an employee class. Now that class might be used in any number of programs to represent employees in a company. There are many fields and properties that a typical employee might have. But let's talk about fields and properties for a moment and get that distinction clear, and then talk about how we use properties in modern C#. A field is just a member, and it can be private or public. Private means that the field can only be seen by methods of the class itself. Public means it can be seen by any method of any class. And we'll take a look at what the difference is there. Let's start simple and give the employee a public field of type int, which will be the employee's age. And we won't give anything else to that employee for now. Down in main, we can make an instance of employee or an object. Those are synonyms, an instance or an object. And what we're going to do with that employee is give that employee a name, much as you would with a variable. In order to instantiate a new employee, that is, make an instance of a new employee, we use the new keyword and then the type we want to create and 2 parens. That creates Dave as an instance of a new employee. Now we can do things like we can set Dave's age, and we could, if we like, retrieve Dave's age and display it. And this program, as you expect, will display Dave's age. Control F5 to run that. Dave's age is 25. That all works just fine, but age is part of the internal state of the employee. And one of the key concepts in object-oriented programming, encapsulation and data hiding, indicate that we should not have this data be public. It should not be available to the function main, which is not a function of the employee class. Rather, it should be private to the class employee. And access to that should be mediated through a property. The reason for that, among others, is that you may change the way you hold or store the employee age. You may decide at a later time to get that from a database, or to compute that from the employee's birth date and the current date. So the more common way and preferred way to handle this is to make age private. We can now give employee a method to get the age, and that would certainly work. We could say int my age. That makes a method, and in that method we could return age. And then, in order to get the age or set the age, we would have to, instead of going directly to the field, we would have to say Dave dot my age. That would return the age, so we could assign that to an integer. And of course, if we wanted to set it, we would need another method, which we might call setAge, and that would take an age to be passed in. So we could say down here, Dave.setAge, and we need to make that public because right now it's private by default. You can see this is becoming a bit of a mess. So we could say Dave.setAge, pass in the age, and then get it back out by saying Dave my age, and going ahead and using that variable to print out the age. All of this would work. However, the client down here is calling setAge and my age and calling methods. And methods should represent behavior. And my age isn't a behavior. And even setting the age really isn't the behavior of the employee. What we'd like is something that looks like a field to this client, but acts like a method to this employee object. And that's where properties come in. With a property, what we can do is come along and say public int age, and it's common in C# to have the private backing variable be lowercase and the public variable be initial uppercase. Remember, C# is case sensitive, so those are different. Public int age, and then within the braces, we create a getter and a setter. And the getter will just return the private variable age, and the setter will just set the private variable age to value. And what's value? Value is a hidden parameter that is passed into set. Let's look at how that works. The way the client works with Dave now is when he wants to set the age, he says Dave.age, using the property, the capital A, equal 35. Notice that to the client, this looks like you're working with a field. You simply set the age equal to 35. That calls the setter automatically, and the 35 is passed in as the value automatically. And the backing variable age is then set. We can then get the age by saying Dave.age, and here, in a place where it's not being set, where it's being retrieved, the getter is automatically called. So a lot of that work is done for you. And now you have a private member, age, which you can change later to be computed or whatever you want, and a public getter and setter that the user can use as if they were accessing a field directly. And this works just as well as the previous. But it gets even better. Because this is such a common idiom, to have a backing variable called age and another public variable called capital age and a getter that just returns it and a setter that just sets it, rather than having to type that again and again, as we're doing here with the name field and property. Rather than doing that and having many of these, all using the same format, there's a shortcut, an incredibly convenient shortcut. What you can do for all of this for age is replace it with this. Public int age get set. And that one line is a signal to the compiler that will translate back as if you had typed all of this above. It's exactly the same and works exactly the same. Behind the scenes, a backing variable is created. Get effectively calls the getter that returns that backing variable, and set effectively passes the value in to that backing variable. So age becomes tremendously simplified, and we can do the same thing with name. And so you see that properties become very, very convenient. At any time, you can expand one of these properties and put more into the getter or more into the setter. But if you need just the standard get and set and want to use properties instead of fields, this new short syntax is tremendously useful. And notice that I have not had to change the body of my program. Inside main, we still use Dave.age to set and get the value. And in fact, when we run it, it continues to run.